Iran and Russia plan to isolate America with the US dollar, and they'll succeed. Iran and Russia are on a warpath to isolate America from the global economic stage. And they plan to do it by using the US dollar. Or, more accurately, by not using the US dollar. See what we mean, and how you can protect your investments amid the coming storm. Iran and Russia strike not one, but 6 oil deals. Russia and Iran need each other. On Wednesday, NOF. 1. The two countries agreed to collaborate on 6 separate strategic energy deals worth some $30 billion. These deals would be an economic boon for Tehran after years of sanctions that were only lifted in 2015 via the arguably contentious Iran nuclear deal. In the 2+ years since, Iran has only managed to secure one notable agreement with French company Total in July, worth $4.8 billion. But fortunately for Iran, Russia needs to diversify its global oil assets. Which brings us to Wednesday's agreement between Moscow and Tehran. Ultimately, that $30 billion deal will achieve a production plateau of 55 million metric tons of oil per year. Igor Sekin, chief executive of Russia's state-controlled Rosneft, said, according to the Financial Times that day. That's more oil than any nation produced in 2016, though Russia did produce the most crude last year for the first time ever. It outsold Saudi Arabia by 22 million metric tons. Russia's move into Iran, then, may be a strategic one, a power play meant to secure Moscow's top producer status into the future. But Russia and Iran's $30 billion deal also serves another purpose, one that Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei didn't shy away from advertising across international lines. Iran pressures Russia to ditch the dollar after branding America as an enemy. On Wednesday, Khamenei urged Russian President Vladimir Putin to sever ties with the US dollar. By ignoring the negative propaganda of the enemies that seek to weaken relations between countries, we can nullify US sanctions, using methods such as eliminating the dollar and replacing it with national currencies in transactions between 2 or more parties. Thus, isolate the Americans, Khamenei said, according to Economic Times. You need this precious metal in your portfolio. Learn how to leverage this rare market anomaly before it's too late. The Supreme Leader's ominous suggestion didn't elicit public agreement from Putin, but the Russian leader did condemn U.S. President Donald Trump's unilateral stance on the Iran nuclear deal, that it was the worst deal ever negotiated. Putin said that Moscow opposes any unilateral change in the multilateral nuclear deal, the Washington Post reported on Wednesday. But Putin didn't go any further with his America bashing, yet. So it's safe to assume that Khamenei's suggestion this week was meant to be more of a public performance of sorts. To let American diplomats know that Russia and Iran will support one another should the United States one day nullify the Iran deal, and that they have the will and the means to disrupt America's leadership in the global economy. That's because a successful Russia-Iran dollar ditch would set in motion a domino effect that could see the greenback overtaken as the global standard in oil deals. A crushing blow to the U.S. economy. Here's how it could play out. If Iran and Russia give up the greenback, others will follow. Make no mistake, Iran and Russia are capable of starting a global movement away from the dollar. Right now, the petrodollar, the dollar-based currency standard for international oil deals, is the standard worldwide. It's been that way since former U.S. President Richard Nixon struck a deal in 1974 with Saudi Arabia, chief oil exporter to the world then and, for the most part, now. A move away from this standard, however, would invite other nations to follow suit, which would result in exactly the kind of isolation that Khamenei discussed this week. Iran is not the only nation considering this move at present. China is actively working to compel Saudi Arabia to trade oil in yuan instead, which would make the standard oil currency petro-yuan. And the impact of replacing the petrodollar with petro-yuan overall would seriously injure the U.S. economy as a whole. Moving oil trade out of dollars into yuan will take right now between $600 billion and $800 billion worth of transactions out of the dollar, Carl Weinberg, chief economist and managing director at High Frequency Economics, told CNBC on Monday. This would mean a stronger demand for things in China, whether it's securities or whether it's goods and services. It is a growth plus for China, and that's why they want this to happen, he added. A growth plus for China, and a massive loss for America, that is. This scenario isn't far-fetched. Venezuela already switched over to Petro Yuan on September 13th. Never miss a single update on oil and gas again. Get real-time alerts sent to your inbox, completely free, here. If Iran and Russia follow through with Khomeini's scheme, joining Venezuela's recent dollar ditch, then further support from China and even Saudi Arabia could follow close behind, excluding the US dollar from trillions in trade. And it all stems back to Washington's fraught relationship with Tehran. American oil companies will be left out in the cold when it comes to playing hardball with Iran. The United States is quickly losing leverage. On Oct. 16, Monday Morning global energy strategist Dr. Kent Moores, a 35-year expert in global oil and gas policy and emerging market economic development, wrote about the deleterious future outlook of a resanctioned Tehran, particularly how it would affect average investors in the United States. Kent wrote that such a future would give OPEC greater ability to exceed their production cap without depressing overall price. We all see what happens whenever OPEC does that. Gas prices skyrocket and put a dent in our wallets. On top of that, Kent wrote, European energy majors and their continental sources of finance are now quite far along in negotiating deals to extract oil and gas in Iran, as well as for major liquefied natural gas (LNG) export contracts. This is to say that energy companies across the Atlantic would still pursue oil deals with Iran, regardless of America's stance toward the Middle Eastern nation, because they're already well underway. Indeed, those deals would continue, Kent wrote, with the European home governments of both companies and banks supporting the ventures. In turn, American businesses will be left out in the cold, or isolated, if you will, because they'll be missing out on global oil buy-in deals. Fortunately, the global energy balance is shifting. If the politicians in Washington allow short-sighted and fear-based domestic policy to sabotage the preeminence of the petrodollar, savvy investors can, and should, find lucrative energy opportunities outside of oil. Opportunities like this one. Utility companies spent $400 million to kill this. It can power your car, heat your home, and even run entire factories. This special fuel is harvested in most parts of the world, and there's enough to power the planet for 36,000 years. Yet DC lobbyists made $400 million preventing it from going mainstream. If the Iran nuclear deal collapses, Iranian hackers will target these U.S. companies. If the Iran nuclear deal fails, U.S. companies will suffer never-before-seen security breaches thanks to Tehran's hacker army. This particular cyber militia has been honing its skills and expanding since 2013. That's when the Iranian President Hassan Rouhani increased the country's cybersecurity spending 12-fold, Business Insider reported in 2015. Rouhani allocated roughly $19.8 million to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Tehran's military, to up its cyber capabilities. While Iran's hacking efforts were initially focused on countering internal dissidents at the time, as the cyber army's proficiency grew, so did its virtual phishing net. It has since begun targeting crucial infrastructure in rival country Saudi Arabia, which has seen countless attacks from Iran over the past 3 years. Now, Tehran's hacker army has reason to set its sights on the United States. Uncle Sam's potential withdrawal from the 2015 nuclear deal that freed up roughly $100 billion in frozen Iranian assets. U.S. President Donald Trump endorsed this deal. He touted a U.S. exit from the pact at the UN General Assembly on September 19th, claiming the treaty is an embarrassment and one of the worst and most one-sided transactions the United States has ever entered into. Although the president has since said that he is seeking to enact tougher terms instead of scrapping the plan altogether, Iran isn't exactly comforted. And Iran's cyber terrorists are already practicing their handiwork across the globe in preparation. The possible aftermath of an Iran nuclear deal disruption on September 20th. Tehran's digital prowess was highlighted when online security firm FireEye exposed a massive cyber espionage campaign carried out by hackers in Iran. The hackers had been actively targeting Saudi Arabian, again, and South Korean firms in the following sectors and subsectors: aviation, petrochemicals, oil refining, military/defense. They did so, according to FireEye, in an effort to injure the nation's big corporate enemies and to punish them for making bilateral oil deals with one another. The targeting of organizations in the aerospace and energy sectors indicates that the threat group is likely in search of strategic intelligence capable of benefiting a government or military sponsor, FireEye explained. Basically, FireEye experts confirmed that the Iranian government is behind, or, at least, benefiting from, these efforts. And proof of the damage the internet militia can inflict is staggering. Its hack on Saudi oil refineries, for example, unleashed computer-crippling malware that hit tens of thousands of PCs across the Middle East. It was carried out, in layman's terms, with a dropper file dropped onto one business PC. When opened, that file disseminated malware throughout the entire firm. But it didn't stop there. The malware then spread like a virus to the computers of said firm's affiliates and subsidiaries, before rippling out even further to disrupt innocent members of the public's online activities and home computer systems. As far as Iran's cyber breach in South Korea is concerned, the hacker army mostly carried out specific revenge maneuvers meant to incapacitate Asian firms associated with the Saudis. The virus the army installed on the southern peninsula jumbled up companies' network software. Now that Iran's hacker army could soon have reason to turn its gaze towards America, it will look to U.S. businesses first. Iranian hacker armies could take down these multi-billion-dollar U.S. firms. Here are just a handful of companies you could expect to see targeted, and Iran wouldn't need to target many, considering how quickly its hackers' malware spread. Boeing Company, NYSE, BA, Aviation/Military/Defense Lockheed Martin Corporation, NYSE, LMT, Aviation/Military/Defense ExxonMobil Corporation, NYSE, XM. Oil Refining/Petrochemicals Chevron Corporation, NYSE, CVX, Oil/Petrochemicals. These four corporations listed above all have massive market caps in the double-digit billions, and each one has beaten the S&P 500 average this year as well. So we're not suggesting you sell everything and stuff your money in your mattress. But any serious attempt to change the terms of the Iran nuclear deal could seriously affect these companies, thanks to an Iranian cyber attack. That's because these firms, were they to be successfully hacked, would suffer immediately in the aftermath. Must see, the defense industry is a gold mine. You can't afford to miss this $6 company. In November 2016, research commissioned by security company Centrify measured the stock market performance of 113 major companies that had suffered a data breach. The study found the value of the 113 companies declined an average of 5% immediately following the disclosure of the breach. The companies lost 7% of customers on average. Of that 7% customer base loss, 31% never returned. For investors, finding a silver lining amid such a dangerous, intangible threat can be daunting. The tenuous U.S.-Iran relationship has created an unfriendly environment for American companies, oil companies most of all, as Money Morning global energy strategist Dr. Kent Moores explained earlier today. Kent has been following developments in the energy sector for 40 years. He's an energy and policy advisor to 29 governments around the world, and he's consulted with 6 of the world's top 10 oil companies. To say he has a good understanding of the U.S.-Iran situation would be an understatement. And right now, Kent says U.S. oil companies have their hands tied. U.S. companies cannot invest more than $20 million in Iranian hydrocarbon, he said. What's more, Kent told us that Trump will certainly re-sign that limit when it comes time to be renewed. And whereas before investors could profit from European companies filling the demand in America's absence, even those companies are holding off for now. Given the discord currently, foreign companies are holding back on projects in Iran, Kent explained. This includes French major Total SA, NYSE, TOT, and its multi-billion-dollar project in LNG and natural gas. They are not walking away from the deal, just suspending future moves. Similarly, Indian and Russian initiatives are also moving ahead at a snail's pace. So it's hard to know quite how to play a situation like this. Fortunately, Kent has a solution. Invest in America's cybersecurity. The U.S. Department of Defense has over 15,000 computer networks and 7 million computers connected to bases around the world. This has made cyberspace the Pentagon's Achilles heel. An Iran-based attack could be truly devastating. In fact, according to Forbes, The rise of hackers digitally breaking into major corporations and government agencies is projected to cause $2.1 trillion in damage. But the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, is about to stomp out that threat. They've been working with a legendary hacker from the DC Black Ops unit of a major defense contractor that also has deep ties to MIT. Together they have developed a breakthrough new system that can withstand a national-level cyber attack and counter-strike these clowns at net speed. This defense contractor has secured 380 critical cyber patents for its tech. And it won't be long before it rapidly migrates to the civilian market. This cyber defender has already acquired 21,000 civilian clients worldwide. Now, this DARPA darling is on the verge of dominating what's expected to be a $1 trillion market over the next 5 years. And along with its other top-secret DARPA-related endeavors, Kentex SpaceX can make this rising cyber powerhouse an easy but massive gainer from here. This small defense firm could turn every small stake invested into $8,590, if not considerably more longer term.